I'm ahead of the curve, also known as James Bergman, and in this video that I've never actually done before, this style of video, I thought I would tell you guys what books were my favourites of 2021. Now, regardless of what we can denounce of last year, what I can personally say is that I was fairly successful in reading a decent amount of books. I read around 100 last year, and that's actually a personal record. Not that I really try and rush and read a lot of books, it just happens. And some of these might have been really short books, some poetry books, some were really, really long. One of them I'm going to showcase in this video. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know how I managed it. My style of reading is fast and slow, just depending on what I'm reading. For example, like if it's a very in-depth philosophical book, then I would tend to be quite slow because it's an in-depth philosophical book. So with a fiction, I would, if it isn't too deep, then I would be quite fast. So it really, really just depends on what kind of book I'm actually reading. So yeah, I'll just cut to the chase. In no particular order, I will announce my 10 favourite books of 2021. Hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so I've talked about this book before, and I've even reviewed it. A lot of these books I have actually reviewed, although a couple I don't think I have on the channel. But the first book that I absolutely loved in 2021 was The Master and His Emissary, written by Ian McGilChrist. In the review that I did, I mean, it was about half an hour long, I think, something like that. And it's an incredibly dense book, but I mean, yeah, look at this. It is pretty big. And the words are quite small. And effectively, for those who haven't watched the review, this is talking about brain science, about philosophy, about art, about religion, and it's most predominantly talking about how the brain hemispheres, the right and left brain, interact with the world on a metaphorical and scientific level. And so, yeah, I mean, this might actually be my favourite book. Oh, I don't know, actually, looking at the pile. This would tie the first one. I mean, this changed a lot in me, and it still is. It's profound. It honestly is a profound book. So if you're interested in these kind of subjects, then 100% check this book out. What we have next is Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf. I read this months ago now. Yeah, quite close to the start of the year last year. Because I remember I was moving house and I was reading this whilst people were viewing. So yeah, so to go into this one rather briefly, what I liked about this one was just how psychological and how also philosophical it was. And the writing is superb, and it's not too long either. And I must admit, even now, I've only read it once, but I'm still kind of confused about what actually happens at the end. But that's kind of why I enjoyed reading it, because a lot of it is shrouded in mystery. And I hate to say it, but I kind of related to the main character a bit more towards the start. You know, his insatiable enjoyment of books and literature, that kind of thing. And also my review, my review is with me with my kind of like Justin Bieber hair. I don't know. Yeah, kind of like that. As I look back at my thumbnails, you know, if I'm going through my channel, and I'm just like, wow, I really have a branch of hairstyles on showcase here. Because I was literally bald in my Demons review by Dostoyevsky. But that was during COVID and everybody lost their minds, so I'll be acquitted on that charge. And I just have this awful kind of hair. Thankfully though, for the first episode of the Bastards podcast, I tied it back. Well, I didn't tie it back, yeah, I slicked it back. And since then I found my favourite hairstyle, by the way, which is this kind of style. So yeah, my YouTube video might be enjoyable to watch just because of that, but also because I go fairly in depth into this piece. It's just a really, really interesting book, one that really leaves you thinking afterwards about what you just read. So yeah, that's it for Hesse's Steppenwolf. This book I didn't actually review. So for those who don't know, if I don't do a video review most of the time, or if not all of the time, I do a written review, and I do it on Goodreads, which you can find the link for that below. Shakespeare, Macbeth, great book. And I didn't do a video review of this because, well, I don't know. I guess I didn't have as much to say, because I only do a video review if I feel like I have something to say that is worth making a video about and you guys watching. So I did a written review of Macbeth instead. So yeah, what I liked about this book is, well, basically this was officially my first Shakespeare book that I read. Obviously I looked into this stuff in English class when I was a few years younger, but I can't admit that I cared that much about school back then, or learning, which is kind of a paradox. I got really bad grades in school, and I kind of messed around until like the last year or so, and I didn't really care about education, although I was interested in learning independently, just not formal education. So yeah, I didn't really pay attention to anything back then. Although I did like English, I just didn't really pay much attention to Macbeth or Shakespeare. But yeah, I mean, this book is, it's just amazing. I mean, I do think that plays should be seen instead of simply read. However, from my experience of reading kind of a small amount of plays so far, but what I would say about this is that I must admit, this is really, really fun to read, because half the time I just wanted to act it out, and I did even kind of orate some of the lines, and I mean, the writing is just amazing. It's yeah, the hype is real on Shakespeare. Really, really amazing. The story of Macbeth as well is brilliant. Good and evil, morality, all of these subjects are tackled. Family. So yeah, I would really, really recommend this one. So, The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. This book, it speaks for itself, more or less, right? It's amazing, 10 out of 10. The only thing that I would say about Dostoyevsky, which I've said before, is it could have been shorter, okay? Blasphemize me all you wish, but Dostoyevsky's work could have been shorter most of the time. The thing with Dostoyevsky is, yeah, sure, he was paid more the more he wrote, but how he writes, it kind of sanctions the justification of it being a bigger book, because any other author I'd say can't be bothered for that. I mean, what's the point? I get very frustrated, like, why do you need to add so much filler? And the thing with Dostoyevsky is that he actually made it somewhat appropriate, because Demons, again, that I mentioned, that very, very long book, even though I was skimming a lot of the time, because honestly, like, Dostoyevsky, yeah, it adds a bit of character development, but there comes a point where you're just so tired and you want the actual premise of the book to happen already. And The Brothers Karamazov, it starts off to a great place, and there's just so many highlights. I mean, the Grand Inquisitor section, my favourite, shock horror. Yeah, I mean, look, even if it is long, and even if I would submit there's a lot of filler, I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And I mean, the religious themes, as you guys would know about me, I just loved all of the philosophy, religion. I mean, obviously Ivan's comments on suffering and the problem of suffering and evil, morality, the dialogue on theodicy and arguments against God that Ivan has in the book, the best I've ever read, really. And I even said in my, well, actually I didn't, but it was kind of a cut. It was kind of a cut sequence of my newest article out now, which is in defense of New Atheism, or the Four Horsemen of New Atheism. So you can check that out if you wish as well, probably in the description. I was going to say there was, we have all these new atheists, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, blah, blah, blah. And what I said was, and I was defending them, but I was also admitting that, and even they admitted this, that they were on the shoulders of giants, right? They already had Dostoyevsky, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer. They had all these guys behind them, right? And all they did was just regurgitate their work, in some sense. And what I'm getting to is that the dialogue alone, even though it's fiction, the dialogue alone on the problem of evil is just outstanding in this book. It heightens any non-fiction analysis, philosophical analysis that I've maybe even read of the topic. Dostoyevsky doesn't strawman his opponent. And yeah, I'm not drinking whiskey or anything. This is just, I think it's an infusion tea. Very nice. But Dostoyevsky doesn't strawman his opponent. Dostoyevsky was somewhat a religious man, although he didn't like to admit it. A bit like Jordan Peterson, actually. But he made his characters fight. He made his characters go in conflict in his books, and I love that. Whether it was with other characters or whether it was with themselves, like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment. And yeah, he does it so well that it's almost a non-fiction piece because of how good it is. Okay, so Patrick Süskind, Perfume, the story of a murderer. I recently reviewed this, actually. My video review is out. The front cover, I know, one of the best front covers ever. Awesome. This one, it's firstly, I want to point out that it's written beautifully. One of the most beautiful books that I've read, or to read. What I like about this, similar to Steppenwolf, is that I didn't really understand it that much. Towards the end, I mean. And I also felt a bit, because when reading it, I was, and I think I said this in my review, I was kind of wondering, I thought it would go somewhere else than I thought it would. I thought that because it says the story of a murderer, it would be like a serial killer fiction that was just really philosophical, and that's kind of what my expectations were. It isn't really like that. It's actually quite a personal journey, and the murdering part isn't really integral whatsoever. Although it does play a part, but it's not integral. And in this sense, I kind of think the story of a murderer subtitle betrays the book in a sense, because it isn't really a murderer story like it comes across. I was pleasantly surprised that my expectations were misled. Although, yeah, I still want to reread this piece because the process of reading it was great. The story unique, and the ending is just so bizarre but amazing at the same time. Next, we have The Prophet by Cioran. If I mispronounced that, I do apologise. So the Prophet it takes about 40 minutes, or at least it took me about 40 minutes to read, and this is amazing. Now, I did do a video review of this because I didn't really see the point, because all I'd be saying is it's amazing, just check it out, although I can do that here, so there we go. What I liked about this book was that it shows that religion isn't really necessary in order to enlighten people. It's kind of a better version of revelations that we've historically or supposedly received. Fairly simple premise. This guy comes down, a bit like Thus Spoke Zarathustra kind of thing, and there's this prophet, and he kind of visits these different places around Earth, I presume. He kind of spreads this message. So yeah, sure, there is a message, but there's no 10 commandments. There's no commandments in the first place, and there's no consequence if you don't believe in it necessarily. Although I would argue that the prophet in this piece, which is kind of a poetry fiction, yeah, I would categorize it as that. And yeah, he's not trying to dictate. He's just kind of saying what people already know, and it's not pushy like someone could say the Quran or the Bible could be. It's very concise. I would believe this if it came down from a god. I mean, much more than the Bible and the Quran, I must admit. And it has all these beautiful pictures that the author himself produced, made. It's a favourite of mine because it gives you sort of a guide, but a guide you already know in some sense. For example, it talks about death, talks about life, dreams, men and women, marriage, love. It talks about all these universal subjects in a way that we can all sort of read and identify with, although at that time of us reading necessarily, we didn't recognize that as much as we have now from reading the piece. So yeah, I think I've said what I want to say about this. It's just The Prophet, amazing book, really, really good. And it literally takes you 40 minutes to read. It's one that everybody should read, I think. and it's one that I will reread again and again and again. It's a really good book probably to give to a child as well, if you want to introduce them to philosophy and thinking more openly about things, let's say. That child will be very bright, I'm sure, if they did read it. Yeah, that's what I have to say about The Prophet. Next, we have CoinciDATE by David R. Lowe. He's got another book coming out, which I hope to read, so we'll see about that. That would be interesting. Yeah, so this book's premise is kind of like going over different people's lives in the modern age, and it's kind of a transgressive fiction piece. And it's also slightly talking about incels as well, because a lot of the characters happen to be incels. Although I don't think that was the author's intention for people to call it an incel book, but it's kind of captured that theme, at least with me and the Bastards. What's so good about this is just the writing is amazing, the characters are really interesting, and it goes to really dark places. Such a unique idea as well, just to format it how it is formatted. And the ending is just crippling. just crippling. So yeah, this is David R. Lowe's CoinciDATE. I would highly recommend this if you haven't already checked it out. FUBAR by McKay. Wow. For an example on how to write a transgressive piece, and for those who aren't aware, a transgressive piece is that which will shock you, will horrify you, but also it leads you to some existential conclusions that might be good for you, or maybe bad, both, perhaps. The premise of this book is following Eric Archer, and he is kind of this drunk, out-of-work actor, and you just kind of follow him on his adventures with women and multiple girlfriends. And it's very depraved, just an all-round amazing book, and the ending is amazing. I couldn't put it down, and that meant that I read it in public quite a lot, so that was interesting. Yeah, just amazing. I don't know what else to say. Just read this book, FUBAR. Second to last, we have Cioran's A Short History of Decay. Now, this piece was soul-crushing. And it's a non-fiction, and it's kind of a philosophical piece, and it talks about, I suppose, nihilism, existentialism, and how lost we are, the feebleness of God, it says, ancient Greeks, the baselessness of existence. So it's a pessimistic piece. Cioran is a legendary pessimist in that regard. I also did a video review of this, and the front cover says passionate, forensic, and lyrical. And the paradoxical thing is that, again, the writing is goals as far as I'm concerned for an existential piece. It's poetic, but it's also soul crushing, because you're reading it and you're like, oh yeah, I get what he's saying. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you think, oh wait, so if that's true, then I guess it's true, and what should I do about that? So it really gets you in these existential positions, which you probably won't want to be in, but there we go. Some people enjoy doing that, but it's just an amazing example of existential non-fiction. Last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, we have Friedrich Nietzsche's The Joyous Science, also known as The Gay Science. Yeah, I mean, Nietzsche speaks for himself. His books are amongst the best non-fiction that I've ever read, best philosophy that I've ever read. It's effectively just a bunch of different essays that Nietzsche wrote about philosophy, and it also includes the Death of God essay, or short kind of piece, I suppose you could say. And I mean, yeah, it's very broad in its philosophy, but it's kind of it's talking about religion, as you know, philosophy and social psychology, political psychology, and it also has some poems as well, and aphorisms. I think it's Nietzsche's, one of his best works, and I've read a few of his by now. It's his best work. For a new reader as well, it is actually quite appropriate, because yeah, it is a bit bulky, but it is, yeah, I mean, I would submit that it's a great introductory work, because it's not as dense as Beyond Good and Evil, and it's much easier to understand about the topics that he's talking about, even though it's still difficult to read, but it's less difficult. Alright guys, that was my top 10 reads of 2021. I will put all my video reviews of the ones that I've mentioned in the description. If you have read those books at all, or even last year, let me know what you thought of them. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this kind of breakdown, more chilled video than my deep analysis reviews. Yeah, so I'm hoping to read a good amount in 2022, although I kind of want to write more, because I feel like 2021 I didn't write that much. I wrote a fair bit, but not that much, and I want to focus more on writing this year than reading. So we'll see how that works. Anyway, I'll look back on this and be like, oh, well, I just fell for it, I just read more. But anyway, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.